YouTube. So recording has started. And so you might find that during the meeting, the questions will be asked by Kelly and Caroline today. And we thank you, Sarah and Laura, for joining us for this Research Conversations. I am doing the hosting, so I'll disappear, but I'm going to keep an eye on the cameras and the mics, and please don't be offended if I mute your camera and mic during this presentation, because we're just going to keep things focused on those people who are asking the questions and those people who are answering. So handing over to you, Kelly and Caroline. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks, Peter.
Kelly, would you like to open? You can open, Kelly.
I'm happy to open. So welcome everyone to this month's Conversation in Research webinar series. So today's topic is all about tips and tricks for finding a good research mentor and collaborators. So as Pete has already mentioned, we've increased security measures. As we said, if you need to write a question, please feel free to type it in the group chat, which I've got open on the side, but Peter will monitor for us and jump in if we need to. And I'd just like to second that we thank you very much to Laura and Sarah for agreeing to share with us their experiences in terms of mentors and collaborators. So we might start, and as I said, Caroline and I will try and facilitate it as best we can. So yell out if you've got a question. Maybe Sarah and Laura, if you'd mind giving us sort of a 1 minute or short brief description of your area of interest in terms of research.
Okay, thanks Kelly. So my primary area of research interest is in cancer imaging. So a considerable amount of work looking at how to optimise image acquisition and understanding of medical images in breast cancer imaging and lung cancer imaging, with a small component around looking at imaging of obese patients. So primarily I look at how to optimise strategies to improve the interpretation and perception of those images, look at the performance of the radiologists or the radiographers in reading those images, what educational strategies they need to use to improve their performance and accuracy, and also looking at different ways of acquiring those images, improve patient outcome and patient care.
And I'm a current research student, so my research is looking at the best ways to implement evidence-based practice, both in departments, and also how do we better equip our students to be more evidence-based practitioners and also ethical practitioners as well, making sure that students are prepared on placements, and also making sure that once students graduate that they're ready to kind of transition into the workforce as well.
Can I just ask how, and often with research we engage with colleagues, we network, we strengthen our research by using others to collaborate with us. Perhaps Sarah, first of all, how did you start off thinking about who to collaborate with, and how did you then take the steps to engage in collaborators joining you with the research?
Yeah, thanks Caroline. I think that collaboration is like a journey, and so the people that you perhaps begin research collaboration with may not be the people that you research with your whole life, and so you have to tailor your collaborations to suit your research interests. And so my initial collaborators were people that I had worked with very close academically, either as when I was a research student, so they were supervisors, and then that journey carried on past PhD completion. But as you sort of grow in research strength, my collaborators form a much more diverse mix now. So there'll be people that I've sort of actively searched out to look for collaborations, perhaps within my university, but other universities internationally, according to our strategic direction of our uni, what we're required to do. But also collaborators can be junior people as well, in terms of research students, postdoc students, early career researchers, mid-career researchers. because collaboration is team nature. So it's about sometimes putting yourself on the spot and sort of making that connection, that almost sort of cold call connection. Hi, my name's Sarah. But other times it's inviting people that you work with or have expressed interest in your work that have made that sort of cold call and saying, come along with me on a journey.
Thanks, Sarah. Laura?
So for me, a lot of it has been about people, again, that I work with academically, and people who have, I guess, similar research interests to my own, and also who bring in, from my perspective, expertise on a particular area that I might not be quite as expert at. So looking at people who are really good at particular methodologies, and seeking out people like that to help me along my journey, and hopefully I'm bringing something to them as well. In terms of different ways that I find people, I find even, things as challenging as it can be, that networking at things like conferences or social networking has been really beneficial for me.
Thank you. I think that was really good because it provided us with an insight into maybe who to go to and how to access people. And I think, as you rightly say, Laura, having people come into your group with particular expertise is really important, given that we're not all experts at everything. And I'm thinking particularly from the perspective of maybe inviting statisticians from my perspective, because that certainly isn't an area of strength for me, primarily a qualitative researcher, but having engaged a statistician to support my PhD research, I think that engagement of those experts is crucial. And also then you learn along the way as well, don't you? It's always, it's an ongoing learning process. Can I just also just now tap you just for a little bit more detail on what you think bringing collaborators into your research group adds?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's multifactorial. There are many benefits. A sole researcher is a very lonely, unsuccessful researcher, I think. We simply do not do research by ourselves. If you even think of micro interactions of the people that you need to consult. So there are extensive benefits to having strong research collaborators and to identify those ones that are going to be good and the ones that are not going to work for you as a team. But in terms of sharing out workload with people and allocating tasks, so to break down bigger pieces of research, to reduce isolation, because it can be quite tough at times when you're working on a large project like an NHMRC project, or even something that's quite large within your own institution, and thinking, I've got to do this part, but I'm doing it by myself in my office late at night, and it's not very exciting. Some research is just not very exciting. It's pivotal to success. So for things like funding, to get your research funded, you have to show there's a strong team of collaborators around you, because you're simply not going to be, you may be the main driver of that funding, and that's great. It's great to have that front person, that show pony, that stellar rock star researcher, wonderful. But you also have to ensure that you have a very good team around you, people that bring strengths like statistics, if that's not your background, qualitative experts, epidemiologists, people that may provide very pivotal links to your studies. So, for example, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander practitioners, health practitioners into your team if you're researching in that field. So all of those things make a very well-rounded, successful collaboration.
I'll just jump in there quickly, because Cynthia's popped up a question in terms of international collaborations, and she's also made the comment of perhaps less obvious partners. So maybe some of the Asian universities, geographically are quite close. Have you got any thoughts on, you were mentioning before about reaching out to international collaborators. Have you got any thoughts on connecting with, and maybe through conferences, or how you might approach that?
Yeah, do you want me to answer that? I think it's really important, because a lot of funding bodies and a lot of successful publications, you will see people from a broader network than just Australia. Of course, you do get that very classic paper where it's written by your department and the people within your department, and that's really important too, because it drives a discipline or a team research ethos. So connecting people and bringing everyone along the journey of the people that you work with very closely is equally important as international collaborations. But more importantly now, universities are sort of saying we want to have more global, meaningful partnerships, and that multidisciplinary health is also understanding about what is done internationally. And I think that Australia has, obviously a rich mix of people coming into the country that bring research expertise, but we actually unfortunately export a lot of our research expertise to elsewhere, and maintaining that connection is really important. It's costly because Australia's at the other end of the world, and so you have to think about things like time zones. Can I reasonably talk with this person often enough to make sense and to keep that momentum of our research? Can our two institutions adequately pair with each other? I think that that's really important. Do we share the same research directions and research values? And I went to a workshop on Monday, and it was like, don't let the destination conference be your holiday. So the conference in Milan is fabulous, but make the most of the people that are in Milan that you've been to sort of connect with. Make sure that you're getting research bang for your buck, not destination bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of making sure that your research is then widely translatable into a range of contexts, it's really important to have those collaborators as well, to ensure that the research is going to be able to be essentially translated into that wider context.
I might just jump back just a little and go back to something that you touched on at the start of that, Sarah, was in regards to smaller collaborations, and maybe just touching, I think we all start there in terms of a small collaboration in your own work environment. That in itself can feel pretty daunting for someone who's not experienced. So I suppose taking that back a step, but in the same vein, is that maybe your experiences in terms of collaborating in multidisciplinary meetings or faculty or department seminars, where you get the chance to not just talk to your own colleagues, so from my perspective an RT or diagnostic radiographers, but then heading out and getting a collaboration outside of your area of expertise, I suppose. Have you got some examples of perhaps smaller scale collaborations?
Yeah, and that's really important. For example, with the University of Sydney, is our health science campus is a satellite to the main campus. So when we have those slightly larger faculty or sort of, I guess, health and medical faculty get-togethers, it actually is an opportunity for you to lay eyes on that person from the School of Public Health, from the School of Medical Physics, and sort of make those connections. And a research collaboration and great research mentorship doesn't need to be between yourself and someone at Harvard. It could be between yourself and the person in the discipline next door, because it's really, you have to be able to work really well together. If you can't actually share the same vision for a research project, ideas are widely divided, for example, or some people are just inherently more difficult to communicate, or they have, their work allocation is such that they can't give as much time to a project or can't physically fit it in. It's not about sort of dissing those people, but it's about prioritising, okay, at the moment this is going to be our centrepiece, and I'm going to work really hard to get this collaboration happening and functioning and get a grant and write a publication, and then come back to those people a little bit later on. Or indeed give them a much smaller role and say, we still really value you. We recognise that you're intensely busy, and here is a small role so that you feel included. So the next time around, that person goes, well, that was a really positive experience. I enjoyed doing that small portion of the research, and now I'm ready to do a bigger one, or now I have more time to do a bigger one. Because many universities have, by their nature, are multidisciplinary, and people do want to work across disciplines. We do, like most of the nursing faculty, some of the time. Really.
And I think that most organisations as well have opportunities for that kind of networking. So like taking advantage of and going to, for me, it's that degree researchers, you know, networking opportunities and talking to people about my own research and talking about their research as well and seeing what kind of links that you could draw and what kind of opportunities for collaboration is really important as well.
Yeah, and that's really good to hear, because I know from my own personal experience, not research based at the university necessarily, although obviously enrolled as a student, from a clinical perspective, that those were the same sorts of things that I got from being involved in, say, the cancer nursing research group, or, you know, a multidisciplinary team where you had more than just potentially your RTs involved. So that was really good. I think you're right. You've got to make sure that you're all on the right track, on the same page. And sometimes people are busy, but I suppose as a mentor, you have to recognise what you can and can't provide. But when you're setting up your collaborations, being able to have that conversation of, you know, how much time, and maybe tailoring it to suit what they've got available.
And I think also because of our professions, the medical radiation sciences professions being small, I think it's really important to expand out into the allied health, to nursing, to look at what physics, to look at what else is going on, to look at where you can you know, establish those really good relationships, connections that then will potentially lead to research collaborations. Now, can I just ask whether either of you have presented at research meetings and what you think the value of engaging in that way is?
Yeah, well, I present at a range of research meetings. So there might be our local sort of discipline-based research meetings or faculty research-based meetings, right up to sort of large international conferences. Quite often at the large international conferences and some of those really larger meetings, it is more about sort of presenting a polished piece of work, so you don't get that opportunity for the nitty-gritty feedback, if you like, unless you get that person from the audience that asks you a question that no one could possibly answer, let alone you, and you're the expert. But the good thing about participating in the smaller meetings is that generally there's loads of energy. People have taken time out from their normal work life to come and listen and to interact. So they haven't gone to a destination per se. They've actually just gone from their office to the small local sort of meeting room. And you get a broad range of people that are interested. So you might get those very early career or junior or student researchers, right through to people that are interested in actually lead research development, for example, associate deans of research. So there's a very large spectrum at the smaller research meetings, I think. So I do get a lot out of them. I probably should do more. But for me also, the area that I'm sort of getting into tends to be a little bit more physicsy at the moment and a little bit more related to statistics. And sometimes it's a really good opportunity for me to get up there and actually say the words and actually present on an area that's sort of, you know, I'm moving into. It's a safe environment. So if I sort of slip up and people go, actually you used to, what you meant to say was absorption there, but you actually said acquisition or something like that. And people are much more kinder. The feedback is much more meaningful. So yeah, I do enjoy it.
And for those smaller lab meetings, from my perspective as a really new researcher, they're great at almost soundboarding your ideas against an audience and getting feedback really early on, kind of before you've gotten so far down the path that you can't change things. So to have those different perspectives from a really diverse range of people in the room is really, really beneficial to me to help guide my research direction.
I think that's a good point. And obviously in a hospital-based environment, which I'm assuming quite a lot of us are as medical radiation practitioners, is that, you know, that might even be part of the requirements before the department supports something to go to an ethics application, for example, is that it has to be, you know, discussed in a team meeting and everyone have that bit of feedback, and that can be daunting in itself. I think you'd agree, just talking to your peers about what it is you want to do, but it also provides that basis of being able to, in a way, defend what it is that you want to do, why it might be different. People might say, oh, hasn't that been done before? But if you've done the background of a bit of reading and found a problem you want to find a solution to, which is what research is all about, you can say, well, yeah, it might have been done in a different way, or we haven't looked at it in this way. So I think it's a really good way to, as you said, to get some really good ideas to help you refine your question and refine your method, or even discuss some of the preliminary results that you might be getting. There may be something that you didn't think of influencing your results. So, as you said, I think it's regular attendance in those sort of meetings can really be beneficial, and might feel like you're putting yourself out there for feedback. But if you think about that, if you're wanting to go on and publish your research or present your research, those are the questions people will probably ask you anyway. So it's best to get it out of the way in an environment that's very supportive. As Sarah said, where they're not there to pull you up and trip you up, they're there to help you.
I'm just wondering about, as well as engaging in kind of small, larger research network meetings or lab meetings, and also presenting at conferences, what are the other strategies that you've taken to help you along your research journey, such as identifying research mentors? Can you just talk a little bit about that and what you perhaps see as the qualities of a good mentor?
Yeah, I think it's in some cases it always comes down to a little bit of speed dating. So sort of like testing the water with somebody and not being afraid to sort of go up and sort of say, I've read one of your papers, it was great. Almost having a little bank of those kind of safe questions to ask when introducing yourself to somebody and finding out about their research profile, and sort of doing the small invitations. Would you like to Zoom into one of our research meetings? We'd love to invite you to do something, or setting up those smaller, safer spaces for people to so for some of those very high profile researchers to say, look, I can't join in your research journey at the moment, but to make it a pleasant opt-in, opt-out so it can grow. Nobody wants to sort of be approached and sort of say, I want to be everything to you. I want to do all of your research with you. I'm going to join myself onto you, and that feels very sort of awkward. But mentoring is about passing on expertise for sure, but it's often about also passing on some of those more generic skills about how to be an ethical researcher, how to collect data at a conference or online, or these are the sorts of things that you don't actually find. They're not probably written about. I've been doing quite a lot of research at the moment about the types of very large clinical trials that fail in radiation therapy, for example, and medical imaging. And why do those trials not get over the line? And a lot of it is about participant recruitment, and participants are not recruited for these clinical trials, so the study doesn't get in. But it's about mentoring people in the sort of, the subtle art of how you do recruit participants. Many of our participants are their patients, their colleagues, their allied health practitioners. They might be from a medical fraternity, and each one has its own subtle difference. And so for me, mentoring is probably less about what unique sort of skill I have that nobody else has, but more about what sort of generic life skills as a researcher I can pass on. The people that you approach at those larger sort of very high profile conferences, they are the people that sort of fill that niche piece of learning that you don't have. But you kind of can't go up with the 50 million questions. You do need to go up with a safe question, and also a very targeted question that you haven't just plucked them out of 100 people to ask the very first question to. You actually know something about them as well.
I think that background research, when you're finding particularly mentors, so for me, the obvious thing there is when I was finding research supervisors, so doing some background research into kind of their area of expertise, not only in terms of their research, but also again in terms of methodology, so that I know that those mentorships are going to bring something that I need to my research. And also from my perspective, it was about finding people who are approachable and willing to help and open, and who have the time to dedicate to that relationship as well. And recognising as well as a mentee that you are bringing something important to that, and that I guess being aware of that dynamic, and ensuring that you're bringing something to them as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
I noticed Nigel's popped a comment up on the chat. So for those of you who might not have your chat up, is something that Peter Mack have obviously instigated recently, is in terms of a radiation research meeting. So looking from a range of disciplines on a monthly basis. And I think, again, that universities often have regular meetings where they sit and talk about research, because that's obviously one of their main drivers in terms of performance. But as Nigel points out, often in a busy clinical environment, research sort of gets pushed to the side, or after hours, or lunch breaks, and all those sorts of things, or short conversations over teas. So thinking about how you can, from a clinical environment, how you can embed that, whether it's a journal club type thing. So once a month you might have a journal club, and you might have a research meeting. Those little meetings where you get to collaborate and come up with ideas. That as a team you can then build on, are really good ways of trying to put it at the forefront, so it doesn't just sort of get left to the back, and every 12 months or so people think, oh, we should have done that, and it never progresses any further. So and certainly from a collaborative point of view, we can, the more you get the opportunity to collaborate as a range of professions, the more that you can sort of come up with a shared idea, I suppose, that is, you can come up with an answer for a clinical question that maybe, for example, the radiographers have been thinking, but when they speak to radiologists, realise that it's also a problem from their end, and how can we make that, how can we solve that problem?
Yeah, and I think both Laura and I come from a clinical background, and I recall what it's like to find research collaborators coming from a radiology department, and also having a large number of questions I'd like to investigate, but perhaps not the department not having the focus on research. Their focus may be on a different area. And so one of the things that is good is to perhaps start off with things like systematic reviews or literature reviews of a topic. And you'll find that in many of the medical imaging and radiation therapy journals, some of the best papers are written by a clinical department, because they have anecdotally a knowledge that you wouldn't have if you didn't come from a clinical background. One of the best ways to translate that sort of like, we always knew that happened, but no one ever wrote about it kind of syndrome, is to do a literature review where everybody finds those articles. You set up a sort of shared Google Docs with all the database of all those articles. You do that data cleansing together. You discuss those many articles that go into your literature review, and you share that academic writing, rather than launching into some large sort of clinical trial where it needs multiple ethics site approval. Because for me as a junior researcher, the ethics was almost like the straw that broke the camel's back, because it's so complex, it's so nitty gritty, it feels so critical. And you sort of think, all I wanted to do was do a lovely project to help my patients, and then the scrutiny on it sometimes appears so harsh that it scares people away from doing that. But a great way to sort of overcome that is perhaps to have an ethics champion within your department, and see if that person can be on your local ethics committee. Because the great thing about ethics committee is you see a basic snapshot of that person's project. So they have to write a lay summary, they have to give a methodology, it has to be grounded in past research of what's known or not known. You get to sort of really go through how they're going to do the recruitment. So it's kind of like a little gold mine of a summary of someone's work, what they're going to do, and you learn a lot from being on those ethics committees. It's hard work, but it really is very stimulating in thinking, yes, I could actually do this, or yes, I see the flaw in that project, or yes, I understand why they haven't explained X, Y, Z enough, and going back there. So I think there is a range of things that can be done if you're in a very clinical situation.
And I think that the collaborations between clinicians and academics are something that is, particularly in the world of MRS, not as well done as we potentially could. And I think it's something that's so important, again, in terms of the translation of our research into actual clinical practice, is that's kind of the missing link, really, are some of those collaborations. So from my perspective, the more that we can collaborate across clinicians and academics, the stronger the research is going to be, and the more potential that we have that research is then going to have an impact.
Yeah. And Mikhail's just made a good point that maybe we have a whole new webinar on ethics submissions. And on an ethics committee.
I'll be a listener and not a...
many moons ago. And one of the best bits of advice I ever got from a research mentor, who was one of my supervisors as well, was, it sounds silly, but it's just that don't reinvent the wheel. Get access to an ethics submission that's already been approved in a similar area. So, if you're looking at something that's to do with radiation therapy, find one that's already been done on radiation therapy. What's the level of detail that needs to be included? What do they expect in those answers? Because if you wrote it from scratch, you might be off on a completely different tangent to what you think they're asking you. So, get a hold of, as you said, a mentor or a champion for ethics in your department, but even just getting access from a mentor of, what projects have they put through before, get 2 or 3 and see what information's on there. And I absolutely concur, Sarah, that once you actually sit on an ethics committee and you see projects that are from a completely different background, and you read through them and you start to look at all of the different aspects that go into it for big pharma trials and that sort of things. I think it's really it's interesting, but often you have to have already gone through that process yourself before you get to sit on one of those committees. So learn from those people, find out who your local representatives are, and go and get their help in terms of how to put together an ethics submission. A few people have also just pointed out that they can be challenging and different because each country and each state, New Zealand and Australia, but also state to state, can be quite different. But the main processes behind that and the requirements, and as Sarah pointed out, you're grounded in what's already known, and your methodology and how you're going to analyse, or what you propose to analyse, are the same. So I think that would be obviously valuable to be able to set something like that up. So we'll put that on our list of webinar topics.
And I think the spirit of generosity and sharing is really important when you're collaborating and engaging in group, and also supporting novice researchers, because if you're not willing to share what you've done, show somebody your ethics submission that they can learn from, I think the collaboration can sometimes stop there. So we all have to take that perspective where we are sharing, and where need be, you get the acknowledgement. But I think it's you kind of do it in a way that's altruistic. And
it doesn't matter at what stage you're at, that sharing is really important. So if you're learning to write an ethics application, and so I normally have a bank of all the past ones that I've done, and it's sort of they would be categorized into some are qualitative or quantitative, some might be at a honours level, some are at a PhD level, and sort of saying to a student or a colleague, here's one that I've prepared earlier. It's not going to be the same. They have updated the templates. It varies from state to state, from institution to institution, but to give people that confidence that here's one that's going to be similar to yours. The other thing is that, I'm sort of writing a couple of large grants at the moment. And one of the things that we'll say, within our group is that who has been successfully funded to this program in the past and writing to them and saying, would you mind sharing your successful application? Because it's highly unlikely that that person's going to be competing with you again. So we just recently asked for a language disorders unit, a centre of excellence, to share their application with us, and we're looking at medical imaging because there were very important ways in which they showed that they were a collaborative unit. For example, what did each person bring? You know, how they phrased wording around how translational this was. And you do get stuck in using the same words over and over again, and when you have so many in us. And when we read someone else's work, we go, beautiful, that's what I've been trying to say. So sometimes it can be as simple as collaborating over sort of phraseology about how to best describe quite a complex topic.
And I think something else to bear in mind is sometimes your mentor might not be someone you're actually collaborating on a particular project with. It might be a resource and a person that you go to for advice or, you know, support. And that's along that same line. They might not be that different research group might not be actually, you know, collaborating on your project, but they can still offer support and mentorship through different avenues. So we've got about 5 minutes to go until we have to wrap this one up. So if there's anyone who has any questions, Peter, did you want to maybe see if Cynthia turned on Cynthia's mic? I think she had a comment.
Yes, I'll do that right now. And if anyone else wants to make a comment or has a question, just raise your hand, and at an appropriate time, I'll open your mic and let you know. Cynthia, can you hear us? I've opened your mic.
Yes, I can hear. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I've really enjoyed this. Actually, it's very interesting to hear these various things. One of the things I wanted to mention was they're going right back to the very basics of trying to create or get in touch with collaborators, particularly at conferences. I had an experience just in a recent conference where somebody had come to the international conference to try and look for collaborators for her research project. And she had arrived, and then when she got there, she had no idea how to actually make those connections. She was kind of a little bit nervous in that particular forum. And I talked to her about the whole aspect of networking, which is something which, when I was in administration, I didn't like the idea of, but I felt I needed to do it. And so I actually went to a business-based networking course, just a day-long course. It gave me so many little tips on how to initially set up those first conversations in order to create the collaboration. I know it seems fairly obvious to some of us, and some of us may be very comfortable with that, but I think there's a lot of people in that early research forum who are not as comfortable with doing that and would love some little tips onto how to make those very first connections. So I just thought I would mention that sometimes we need to go right back to those personal abilities and communication issues that we sometimes have some problems with.
Yeah, I think that's really important, Cynthia, because I don't know that it matters how long you've been in the sort of, you know, research game for. It still is, I still find it a little awkward or nerve-wracking, or I feel a little bit shy about sort of, you know, just walking up to somebody and saying, hey, you know, I'd like to do some collaboration. I actually find myself just doing a little bit of pre-work before getting to those meetings and looking at what things are of most interest to me, what things I already know about, what's something new that I don't know about, what's something that's going to help me, and going and listening to that person's talk, so not turning up afterwards, you know, sorry I missed the talk, hey, I've got a question for you, writing down some things that they say, and then having a quite structured question to come with them afterwards. It is an art form in introducing yourself, in presenting yourself as a fellow good collaborator, and it's not something that maybe everybody has inherently in them, and I do find sometimes it's I feel a little bit shy to do that, and sometimes it's worked really well and other times it has not. And people,
Yeah.
No, I definitely think doing your research about the person is one of the most important things. But also, I think the other important element is having your almost elevator pitch of your own research and yourself and what you can bring to the collaboration is really important as well. So that you can not only be, I guess, seeking that information or collaboration from another person, but also showing them what you can bring to it as well.
And I think that's something that from a research supervisor's point of view, so my students, is they're not very good at selling themselves and what they are good at. And that's a skill in itself, is, you know, presenting why they want to be involved with you or what's good about what you're doing. Gay's also popped on a note saying, don't forget, you can always email people too if you read an interesting article. And perhaps, I mean, obviously before a conference, you get the, the abstracts and the agenda for the week or for the conference. So, you could maybe email them beforehand saying, look, I know that you're presenting on such and such, would it be, I'd love to be able to catch up with you during the conference and maybe break that ice before you even get to meet them face to face is maybe one way you could, I suppose, rather than cold calling them on the, and meeting them, you can say, I'm Kelly, I emailed you about your presentation, I've now seen it, and you can then talk about maybe what things you might be able to offer. So, thank you.
And I think, as Michael's, suggested, encouraging people to, while they're studying, while they're in the throes of doing the project, to start getting out there, presenting, networking. I think we always have to remember in a way that first impressions count. When you first meeting somebody, it's often a lasting impression, that first encounter. So I think we have to, be prepared, I think. Now, I think we need to wrap up the webinar now. So I'd just like to thank Laura and Sarah for your contributions, for stimulating a really fruitful and interesting discussion. We can perhaps, as Kelly indicated, organise to look at an ethics or preparing for ethical webinar in the future. And we're always happy to take people's suggestions for future webinar topics as well. So, we're very happy to, to look at alternatives and to plan ahead and look at what practitioners want us to chat about. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Peter, for organising. I'll leave you to have the final closing words, Peter.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for participating. There's been some really great comments on chat and questions as well. I don't think it's worthwhile me reading these through right now, so we're going to think of a way that we can share it, and maybe the text that appears underneath the YouTube video that sort of captures some of the conversations that went on. But the chats and comments really enriched this webinar as well. So thanks, everyone, for participating. And I'll look forward to sharing this webinar on YouTube and seeing you again in a couple of months for our next research conversations. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Bye-bye.